Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a look at the incredibly complex biochemical process of respiration. But we're going to reframe it completely. Think of it not just as textbook biology, but as an epic hero's journey. We are going to follow a single oxygen molecule as it travels down the body's high-stakes circulatory highway, facing challenges, making alliances, and ultimately, keeping you alive.
It's a pretty provocative question, right? Every few seconds, you take a breath without even thinking about it. But what actually happens to that single gulp of air the moment it crosses the threshold of your body? Millions of microscopic events are triggered literally the second you inhale. Let's drop straight into the action of this biological delivery mission.
All right, Section 1, the Oxygen Delivery Mission.
Okay, let's dive into this. Our microscopic protagonist, a single oxygen molecule, arrives at the alveolar loading docks deep in your lungs. These alveoli are tiny balloon-like air sacs where the outside world meets your internal bloodstream. Let's follow its sequential, step-by-step logic path so we don't get lost in the chemistry. First, oxygen enters the lungs and diffuses into those alveoli. Second, it crosses into the blood where it binds to a specialized transport protein called hemoglobin. And third, it travels through the circulatory system, dropping off at active tissues to fuel your cellular processes. It is a beautifully efficient, three-step logistical pipeline.
Let's look at the stark math behind this delivery system, because it's pretty wild. For every 100 milliliters of oxygenated blood, the system carries about 20 milliliters of oxygen. But look at the actual delivery rates. During a normal resting state, it only drops off about 5 milliliters to your tissues, meaning it keeps a massive reserve on hand. But during strenuous exercise, the delivery rate triples, dropping off up to 15 milliliters. Your body is dynamically scaling its delivery based entirely on demand.
Moving on to Section 2, hemoglobin's binding affinity. This is basically a molecular romance.
The vehicle driving our hero oxygen is hemoglobin, and let me tell you, they share a very dynamic relationship. Hemoglobin has to inherently know exactly when to hold on tight and exactly when to let go. The source material uses a brilliant analogy here, comparing this molecular bond to a romance. In the lungs, we see a left shift on the oxygen dissociation curve. This is association, or pyar, meaning love and strong attachment. Up there, oxygen levels are high, the temperature is lower, and CO2 is low. Hemoglobin tightly embraces the oxygen. But down at the tissues, we see a right shift, which is dissociation, or judai, separation. The conditions change completely: low oxygen, higher temperature, and higher CO2. These new conditions force hemoglobin to break the bond and release our hero to the tissues that desperately need it.
Which brings us to Section 3, the tissue drop-off and carbon dioxide return.
Nature abhors a one-way trip. The very moment oxygen is dropped off, the return journey has to immediately begin for the waste product generated by those tissues, the carbon dioxide passengers. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how carbon dioxide hitches a ride back to the lungs. It doesn't just travel as a simple gas. About 7% simply dissolves in the blood plasma. Roughly 23% binds directly to the amino acids of the hemoglobin protein, forming carbaminohemoglobin. But the vast majority, a whopping 70%, is converted into a compound called bicarbonate.
But here's the catch. Converting CO2 to bicarbonate inside the red blood cell creates a massive logistical problem. It completely throws off the electrical charge of the cell. Enter the chloride shift, also known as the hamburger phenomenon. To prevent the inside of the cell from becoming dangerously acidic and electrically unstable, the newly formed negatively charged bicarbonate ions are pumped out into the plasma. In exchange, negative chloride ions are pulled into the cell. It's a perfect one-for-one molecular swap to maintain balance.
So, what happens when the blood finally arrives back at the lungs? Well, everything we just talked about has to run in reverse. Logically, it plays out like this. Step 1. The bicarbonate re-enters the red blood cell. Step 2. The chloride is pushed back out. Step 3. An enzyme converts that bicarbonate back into pure carbon dioxide gas, which then diffuses into the alveoli, ready to be exhaled into the atmosphere.
Let's put a number on this so you can see the scale. Here is the exact metric you need to know. For every 100 milliliters of deoxygenated blood arriving at the lungs, exactly 4 milliliters of carbon dioxide is successfully delivered into the alveoli for removal. The precision of this continuous loop is just absolutely staggering. Now, these two famous textbook effects summarize the entire process beautifully, and they're essentially just the inverse of each other at opposite ends of the circulatory highway. The Bohr effect happens at the tissues. The presence of high carbon dioxide and acid forces hemoglobin to release oxygen. On the flip side, the Haldane effect happens at the lungs. The binding of fresh oxygen forces hemoglobin to kick out the carbon dioxide. They are perfectly mirrored biochemical triggers.
Section 4. Mission Control, Regulating the Breath.
So who is actually driving this entire process? Because the blood and lungs aren't making the decisions. Your nervous system acts as mission control for this continuous transport loop, ensuring the rate and depth of this journey precisely matches your body's minute-by-minute demands. This control is divided into specialized brain centers. The primary driver is the respiratory rhythm center in the medulla, which maintains your normal baseline breathing. Right above that, in the pons, is the pneumotaxic center. Its job is to moderate breathing. It can actually reduce the duration of your inspiration, which effectively speeds up your overall breathing rate when you need it. Okay, get ready for a really surprising fact. You would naturally assume your brain monitors oxygen to tell you when to breathe, right? Nope. The brain's chemosensitive areas are virtually blind to oxygen. Instead, they are triggered entirely by the toxic buildup of carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions. Your fundamental drive to breathe isn't actually a cry for more oxygen, it's a desperate reflex to get rid of excess carbon dioxide.
Let's look at Section 5, System Breakdowns, the villains of respiration.
We've seen the hero's journey and this brilliant infrastructure that supports it. But what happens when villains attack this beautifully structured gas exchange system? Well, system breakdowns turn this highly efficient highway into a biological traffic jam. Let's look at two major respiratory disorders that mechanically ruin the process. First is asthma, typically an allergic response where mast cells release histamine, causing the airways to violently constrict, making it incredibly difficult to exhale. Second is emphysema, primarily caused by cigarette smoking. The smoke literally destroys the delicate walls of the alveoli, massively reducing the surface area available for gas exchange.
But the most insidious villain is chemical: carbon monoxide poisoning. Remember our transport vehicle, hemoglobin? Carbon monoxide acts as the ultimate toxic, clingy interloper. It hijacks the transport vehicle, binding to the exact same seats that oxygen is supposed to use, completely preventing our hero from boarding.
And here is the terrifying multiplier that makes this so deadly. Carbon monoxide doesn't just casually compete with oxygen. It has a 200 to 250 times greater binding affinity to hemoglobin than oxygen does. If both gases are present, carbon monoxide bullies oxygen out of the way every single time, forming an unbreakable bond.
When carbon monoxide binds tightly to hemoglobin, it forms a compound called carboxyhemoglobin. Visually, this creates a shocking shift in your blood color. Instead of the dark crimson of normal deoxygenated blood or the bright red of healthy oxygenated blood, it turns a highly dangerous, vivid cherry red. And while this is happening, your body's tissues are being completely starved of oxygen, leading to fatal hypoxia. From the moment it navigates the alveolar loading ducts, to the chemical romance of binding, to the precise drop-offs, and the delicate chloride shift on the return trip, gas exchange is nothing short of a miracle. Millions of these microscopic heroes complete this perilous journey every single second. It's a complex, elegant, and super fragile system that operates flawlessly for most of your life. So with all that structured biology in mind, are you ready to appreciate your next breath? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.